Hey, Roy here. I'm so excited to share this episode. Audio description and localization don't often share the same conversation, and they probably should, but not in the way that you think. Both fields take a story built for one audience and carry it carefully to another. Both require millions of small creative decisions that nobody sees when they work, and both run on the same currency, which is trust. Scott McCarthy has spent his career protecting that trust at DreamWorks. Let's get into it. As always, this is for Kevin. Welcome to the ADNA Presents. This is Roy Samuelson. Scott McCarthy has spent more than 2 decades making sure that a story begins in one language and one cultural context and lands with the same weight and humor and intention somewhere completely different. As Vice President of Localization at DreamWorks Animation Television, he oversees dubbing across 30 markets. That means that he's listening to what makes a character feel true and what makes that joke land and what makes the audience really trust what they're watching. And trust, Scott has said, is directly tied to emotion. So whether an audience feels something that matches what the story intended, that's not something you can really codify. And I think that's where his thinking gets really interesting. It connects for me to something that I sit with in audio description, that AD is often categorized alongside translation, but I think that framing kind of undersells it, that a good AD script isn't a translation of what's on screen. It's an original adaptation. It's a piece of writing that has to carry the emotional architecture of the original without the visual. And I think that's where this conversation has really gone to align, because when I think about interviewing Scott here, I think we're both navigating something from different sides of the same problem. He's also pursuing a Master of Legal Studies at UCLA with a focus on technology law, which he tells you that he's thinking about accountability and where responsibility actually lands when AI reshapes how voices are made. So I'm glad he's here. And Scott, welcome to the ADNA Presents podcast. Thanks for being here.
That was a lovely introduction. Thank you very much. It's always weird listening to people talk about myself and what I do, and it never gets comfortable.
It's yes, it's that squishy kind of feeling, right?
I know I'm doing a lot right now, and I don't get really overwhelmed until someone like recites back to me all the things I'm doing. And I'm like, oh, wow, maybe I need to pull some of that a little bit. I got 2 kids under 10 at home as well, and so it's just, it's a lot. But
There's a lot going
it's
on.
fun.
I find that same thing. Like in the moment, it can feel so overwhelming. But yeah, looking back, there's been a lot of stuff that's been going on here.
Yeah.
When we think about localization, let's dive into some of the work that you've done, and hopefully it won't tap into that overwhelm. When you think about the story and how it actually crosses that, let's call it the cultural bridge, when one story actually crosses that cultural bridge intact, what makes that localization work? What was present that usually isn't?
I think the most simple way to answer that question is from a comment I got on one of the LinkedIn posts I did, where I was talking about this work and some of that cultural nuance and some of the skill, the craft that goes into taking something made for one language and one culture and translating it, adapting it for another. And this one adapter was describing her work, and she goes, we breathe in X language and we exhale Y. And I thought that was one of the most beautiful descriptions of what it is that we do. And that I read that, I'm just like, that is going to stick with me for the rest of my career. I'm going to be reciting that on just about every interview I do, because nothing really captures the importance of what we do than that comment.
Oh, that's beautiful. I think about a linguist I was talking to once in the context of that AI layer that gets put on as almost like a blanket without that nuance. And what I hear in that breathe in X, exhale Y is that organicness and the freedom of the flexibility almost. It's not just a one and done, it's a relationship.
Yeah, I think relationship is another great way to describe the work that we do, and finding these words that really bring meaning and importance to it. And in this age of AI and trying to figure out where AI can help, where it can be a tool, where we should not take it, the relationship element that you described is a great example of that's not what AI can do. And that's where we need that human element to take this work into another culture properly in a way that's respectful, in a way that is truly honoring the language that we're dubbing, or even in the work that you do.
I love it. Yeah, it's let's jump a little bit more into that relationship. When I think about any relationship that I'm in, whether it's professional or even family relationships or more other kinds of relationships, that there is a trust factor that's being built in being able to expand the relationship and evolve it. I know you've talked about transparency and trust when it comes to digital storytelling. From where you sit, where do you think that trust actually breaks down? Is it maybe at the creative level or is it somewhere else?
To answer that, you have to look at who is the trust between. And I think where it breaks down is when we forget who that trust is between. And we have to remember that the trust is between this, in my case, the content creator and your audience, your consumer. And that is really the only trust that we should be focusing on, because when you break that trust, that's where you have this breakdown that you're describing.
Wow. Thank you for letting me attend your TED Talk here. I still have more
Uh,
questions to go. This is like, how many mic drops can we have in one sitting here?
I'm still on my first cup of coffee. So if I'm giving this some good audio bites, it's just, that's a fluke, because I am not in my best until like coffee cup number 2.
Oh, nice. All right. Let's keep rolling with what we got then.
Yeah.
We've mentioned AI already in this conversation. What are you paying attention to that you think most people in the localization space or even in the AI space might be underestimating?
I'm paying attention to the consumer reaction to AI. And I've said before, you don't even have to look at localization. You can look at just about any industry. You look at the fashion industry, and you had J. Crew and Levi and Gap, and they created these AI models to sell clothes, and they faced this immediate backlash. You have all the holiday commercials where it was all these AI generated commercials to sell their product, to sell their brand. And I think the audience responded very negatively, that they wanted more authenticity. And again, that connects to trust. I think you look at examples outside of localization, you look at what happens within the world of dubbing and all these dubs that were created by AI and synthetic voices that get all this backlash from consumers. And then the platform has to take it down and redo the dub through traditional means. That's what I'm listening for. I'm listening for the consumer's response to this stuff, because the consumer is telling us where we've taken it too far. I think AI is a tool. I think it has a place within, certainly with my world of dubbing, but the audience is going to tell us where that line is at. And if we're not respecting and listening to the audience, we push it too far because of our own motivations to save costs, or to I don't know, the host of reasons that studios like my own will push this technology forward. If we do it for the wrong reasons and we're not listening to our consumer, I think that's where we get into trouble. And that is the space that I'm watching very closely, because I think the answers are all around us.
It's so beautifully said. And again, this trust theme, I think that's how we originally connected, seeing that article that you had written about trust. And a lot of our focus has been on connection. And I think trust is the bridge. And it's a great answer. And again, for our audience, this was not prepared. This is, again, not even done with the first coffee, if I'm understanding your status here. When we talk about trust, it's tied to emotion. And that emotion, how do I say this? When you're evaluating a localization project or deciding maybe you'd like to give feedback on a different creative choice, how do you actually know that the emotional contract with the audience, that trust is intact or has been broken? What's that feel like in practice? When you think about the work in localization, when you're building trust, how do you know that emotional contract is solid?
By the way, you're hitting all the key words that that can inspire me to do this work, from trust, relationship, emotion. Like, you're tackling everything. It's fantastic. Here's a weird way for me to answer that question. I don't think it's for me to say. The most important decision I make in localization has nothing to do about how that script is adapted. It's not. The most important decision I make The only reason I have a job is to make sure I choose the right partners in the locations where we're dubbing to be attached to that project. And so there's a lot of considerations that go into that. Like DreamWorks is about to release Shrek 5 this year. We have studios that have been a part of Shrek and the franchise of Shrek since the first movie. I'm going to make sure that the studio that I choose is going to has that history, has that connection, has that relationship with the franchise. There's going to be shows that I have that are maybe they're like a preschool show, and so they have a very young cast. There's certain studios that their strength is in kid casting and working with children. I have other shows that are going to be real song heavy. I have studios that are going to be really great with how they approach songs. And so choosing the strengths of my partners in these locales is the most important part of my job. And then when it gets into the weeds of those decisions and that trust that you make with your audience, you don't want someone like me behind a desk in LA trying to say what's the best way to bring that script to market in France and Germany, Italy, pick your country. The reason that we dub in the country of origin is because they know their language. They know their culture better than anyone else. They don't need me telling them what's the best way to handle that joke or to handle that expression or to handle that character. There's some input that I can give from maybe from a brand, like a more overarching kind of DreamWorks brand perspective. But when you really get into the weeds of the decisions, the creative decisions that are made on the ground, they're the best to make those calls. And that's another layer to this trust that we're talking about. There has to be a trust between me and the studio partners that I pick in each book.
I think this is all leading up to another question. And just to be clear, I did not craft this question on the fly. I anticipated asking it, but in the context of what we're talking about, it's so relevant. You're protecting stories for a living in what you do. And I'm curious about your own personal opinion. If you could change one thing about how the overall industry in general thinks about the responsibility of protecting stories, what would that be? What would be that one thing that you would love to change in the industry?
I think it comes down, and again, this is something I've spoken about, I've written about, which is this educational component. The biggest struggle, challenge that I saw when I came into this world of dubbing and localization was the fact that people just didn't understand what this work is. You would have meetings with filmmakers who wrote these incredible scripts and incredible jokes and characters with these very specific accents and backstories. And they'll be like, yeah, just do it just like that. And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't work that way. Like that accent doesn't carry the same meaning in this other language that we're going to take it to. That joke that you wrote, which is hysterical, it doesn't work in country XYZ. It has to be localized. It has to be adapted in a way that is relevant and keeps the intentionality of that scene or that joke or that character, but it has to be adapted. And I think there was this, I guess, a false understanding of what this work is. You would get a script and most people would think, oh, here's a joke, here's a line, give it to a translator, it translates into this one way. And I don't think they realize that if you give that same joke to 10 different translators, you're going to get 10 different translations for that joke. And that to me that's the thing I love about this work. That's the thing that makes this work so special and so important to me. But it's the thing that I think the industry at large has never understood. And there's been a lot of people who have spoken about this recently. Is it ties into this bigger problem where dubbing is not seen as an original production. So it's a hard thing to say because you're trying to be respectful of the filmmakers who made their content and they made it for a specific audience in many cases. So it's hard for them to grasp that we're going to take this work, we're going to adapt it for a new language, and we're going to treat it like it's its own production. I love it when people talk about this isn't a dub, this is the German original, or this is the Italian or the French or the Japanese original. I think we have to, my long-winded way of answering your question is I think we have to stop thinking about localization as this post-production element that's part of this domestic pipeline. It is its own production, and it's an original production that has so much creative that goes into how it's adapted, that we're going to honor the original. Of course, that is the blueprint for how we do our work and how things are adapted. But it is not a one for one when it comes to translation and adaptation and how you cast in every aspect of this work.
What a great answer. And just the reframing of name your language original, that alone shifted something in me. I felt how that creates the adaptation feel that I've falsely assumed that it was one for one. Before I talked to that linguist, it's, A plus B equals C, 1 + 1 = 2. It's that equal. And what I'm finding fascinating in this conversation, and this is where I see a tie-in back to audio description, is that awareness building. You had mentioned the educational component of this work. And that seems to relate to building awareness, that once people understand the concept, once they get, this is an adaptation, this is a blank original, that awareness helps bring that story to life. And I have to bring it back to something you said at the beginning of this interview, that when things are alive, they are breathing. And is that not breathing in X and exhaling Y?
100%.
How did you do this? This was not prepared, everyone. We did not know. Really great. Scott, we've covered so much in this interview. Is there anything else you'd love to share with our audience?
No, we should do this again after we've had 2 cups of coffee. We're going to really knock it out of the park at that point.
Oh, I would love a part 2. How can we follow you on social media until that happens?
I am on LinkedIn. It's the only social media I am on, and that is enough. I don't want, my brain can't take any more than that, and it's already probably too much.
Thanks so much for joining us on the AD&A Presents.
Oh, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much.